आजाद भारत में ये कांग्रेस के लोगों ने, इंडियन अलायंस के साथियों ने मां भारती का एक अंग काट दिया.
The island has become the center of conflict.
Tiny island between India and Sri Lanka.
The contentious island of Katchativu.
Another island is in the eye of storm.
Katchchateevu Island.
Katchativu.
Katchativu.
The Katchchateevu Island.
Of Katchativu.
Katchativu is an islet between India and the island of Sri Lanka. This island is not an inhabited island. It is an island that people visit. Of course, the Sri Lanka Navy has presence, a permanent presence on that island. The Katchativu Island, there's a shrine called the St. Anthony Shrine, and that shrine continues to be visited by Sri Lankans. There's no fish around Katchativu, so there's no actual reason for fishermen to come there either from Sri Lanka or from India. Katchativu for the longest period was a part of Sri Lanka, even during the British, during the Dutch and the Portuguese period, and even before occupation. For a very short period of time, the Ramanad kingdom, they had a very short presence. And this islet has been in dispute for a considerable period of time. There are some Indian politicians, I would call them troublemakers, who say that Katchativu was ceded to Sri Lanka. Those Indian politicians are saying that it was a part of Indian territory. Prime Minister Modi raised the issue of Katchativu because his party BJP is currently competing against Congress, and he wants to score a political point. It can damage the good relationship between India and Sri Lanka that has been built especially during the economic crisis of Sri Lanka, because in the past there was a period from 83 to 87, Indian government armed, trained, financed and directed 6 terrorist groups including the Tamil Tigers, and Sri Lanka's economy was ruined because it will damage eventually, it will create suspicion and animosity between the communities. Historically, archaeologically, politically, socially, Katchativu was never a part of India, and Indian politicians who use the word that Katchativu has been ceded to Sri Lanka do not know the history of Katchativu. Through a process of negotiation and discussion, both the Indian government and the Sri Lankan government agreed in 1974 that Katchativu is an islet that belongs to Sri Lanka. When the Congress government led by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was in office in India, and Mrs. Sirimao Bandaranayake was the Prime Minister in Sri Lanka, they decided to revisit the issue of the Katchativu Islet. And then through a very systematic process of negotiation and discussion, India said that this island will no longer a part of a disputed island, but will be a part of Sri Lanka. So both the Indian and the Sri Lankan delegations that negotiated examined this disputed status meticulously. In fact, the Sri Lankan team was led by W.T. Jayasinghe, who was Foreign Secretary. W.T. Jayasinghe wrote a book very detailed book on Katchativu. And in fact, when I visited Katchativu, I took several copies of this book and I presented it to the naval officers because they had not heard of or read this book. In the Indian Ocean region, there are many issues with regard to sovereignty and maritime boundaries. As the geopolitical order changes, governments want to take control of these islands, because when you control these islands, you can project naval force. So I think that there must be greater understanding between nations, because otherwise it will lead to dispute and conflict. So it is imperative, essential for political leaders not to raise these issues when there is no issue. When the Katchativu Agreement was signed between India and Sri Lanka in 1974, it was decided that the Indian fishermen could come to Katchativu, dry their nets and also fish in the waters around Katchativu. But I want to share with you, based on my own visit to Katchativu, that area is not a fishing area. There isn't fish. There are other areas in the Pork Straits that are very rich in fish. We call the Pork Straits the pond, and it's a very rich area. So historically, the Indian fishermen and the Sri Lankan fishermen both fish in that pond, what you call the Pork Straits. In 1976, there was another agreement signed between India and Sri Lanka, where the two countries decided that the fishermen of India should respect the Sri Lankan exclusive economic zone, and the fishermen of Sri Lanka were told that they have to respect the Indian exclusive economic zone. So in 1976, it was decided by India and Sri Lanka that the fishermen from India will not come to Katchativu and dry their nets or fish around Katchativu because of the agreement on the EEZ, what is called the Exclusive Economic Zone. Nearing an election, Tamil Nadu politicians and sometimes the national politicians in Delhi, they will make some noise. They will say that this Katchativu has been given by the Congress politicians to Sri Lanka, as if there was no negotiation and dialogue. So the BJP leader and the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and the Foreign Minister, Jayashankar, has made a statement as if Katchativu was given by India to Sri Lanka without serious negotiations. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, Ali Sabri, a very brilliant man, he gave the proper reply to the Indian government, an appropriate response. He said that there is no need to revisit the issue because this has been discussed, negotiated, and solution has been arrived at by the two governments. The diplomatic relationship between Sri Lanka and India has not been affected by the Katchativu issue because both the Indian officials and the Sri Lankan officials, they know very well that Prime Minister Modi raised the issue of Katchativu because his party BJP is currently competing against Congress and he wants to score a political point. There's an understanding between India and Sri Lanka, especially the officials, that this is something that is happening at a political level, and it shouldn't affect the diplomatic, the administrative relationship between the two countries. So it is imperative, essential for political leaders not to raise these issues when there is no issue. Because if they raise these issues, it will lead to suspicion and animosity. That should be avoided at all costs.